So I'm Scarlett Doc. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist and mostly work inpatient, have training in therapy, not just meds. Um, and that's about it.
Cool. Stanley?
Hi there, I'm Stanley Wheeler. I'm presently employed as a prosecuting attorney in a county in Idaho. I write in a variety of genres, and I've enjoyed playing games and creating games since I was a child. The books I'm currently writing now are a Flintlock fantasy series called Tomahawks and Dragonfire. The first book in the series is called Threading the Root Eye.
Oh, wow. Sounds fun. I'm Heather Monson. Seems I'm here to represent your humble gamer. I've been playing various roleplay games for decades. I ran a local live-action roleplay game for a few years. Kind of stepped back from it in recent years because I'm working on raising 3 littles, but trying to keep my geek cred intact. So that's me. And let's dive into it. Any overarching thoughts on why people play games?
Because we want to have fun.
In a nutshell.
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Done.
Okay. Panel's over. No, actually, I'm always reminded of something. I've always been a Star Trek nerd as well. And I forget the episode, but in one of the episodes, Spock says, now I'll mess up the quote, but it goes something like this. The more complex the mind, the greater the need for the simplicity of play. And games and play are a great escape for us. It's a way to relax our mind, to get away from what's real and what's a burden, and to just enjoy life.
Yeah. In my own experience and working with my kids now, I find play is also a tremendous learning tool, way to discover things kind of safely, not the hard way. Scarlett, you know a great deal more about this than I do.
Yeah, we use, even play therapy a lot to give kids a safe place to explore different ideas. And play in general is where kids can start developing social interaction skills. When you go from being an infant and everything's just kind of revolved around you to now you're 2 years old and you have interest in interacting with other kids, you start learning things about, sharing and how do you take turns. And then as it gets more sophisticated and you transition into board games and tabletop games, you can start exploring the finer points of human interaction. If I make this decision or that decision, how will it affect my relationship with these other people? And how will it affect the play of the game?
Exactly. Yeah. From a gaming perspective, one thing I loved/hated as a player and as a world runner was keeping track of those decision details so that they would come back to bless or haunt players in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You like to exercise a little karma in your games, did you? No, speaking about children and games, I was just trying to think back. Has there ever been a time in my life when I have not enjoyed playing games? I can't think of a time. I'm getting an echo too.
Yeah. Might be my bad. I was not able to get headphones working this morning. I do apologize for that.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. All right, and there's our friendly neighborhood mute button. All right. So
It'll make it tough to carry on, though, if the moderator mutes herself.
okay, that is sort of true. Okay, I'll guide things along and try to remember that lovely little mute button when you guys are talking. And that way we should avoid the echo, and I'll just have to pay closer attention. Let's see, where were we pre-echo talking about decisions? Let's see. You had just said that that there had never really been a time in your life when you had not enjoyed games. Could you talk to that idea for a moment, kind of about which games have interested you more over the years and how what you've enjoyed has shifted?
Oh, sure. And I think this is a universal experience that, at least as children, we loved games. Lots of people, I think, when they get older, they outgrow that desire to play most games anyway. But I really got into gaming, what I would call seriously, in junior high and high school. I discovered Dungeons and Dragons, as well as a lot of military sci-fi simulation games. This was before, the only video games we had at the time were Pong. Yeah, the the two boards that bounce the ball back and forth. and so the games let you get together and do something with somebody else. And so you have social interaction, which I've always enjoyed. And yet, most of my playing now is solitaire games, because I just don't know anyone who lives near me anymore that I can play games with, at least not very frequently.
Yeah,
so
life allows.
Yeah, I used to like complex games that tried to get in a lot of realism, that were very complicated. Now I've gravitated to simpler games, skirmish games, role-playing games. I don't like to have to look at a lot of tables anymore. I can roll a few dice. I can make up modifiers and figure them out in my head. The simplicity of play has become more important to me as I've gotten older.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of my favorite quotes in the world is from C.S. Lewis. Went something to the effect of, "When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of being childish and the desire to be very grown up." I think that plays a lot into our love of gaming. Scarlett, any thoughts on how gaming changes as we grow, how its purposes might shift a bit?
I've noticed the same kind of pattern as I've gotten older, and some of that has to do with having, 4 rugrats running around and working, and there's just not as much time for gaming. And so simple games are a lot more satisfying at this point than more complicated games. I've always been into video gaming. Haven't really gotten too much into tabletop games. And I remember as a teenager spending hours on playing various Zelda games. And I got one recently for my kids and for me. And I've made it about halfway through it, and I'm like, I'd rather just kind of run around the field on the horse, like shooting random things, than really work through this at this point. And so now, a lot more of my gaming is very simple things that don't really require a whole lot of thought. And when it comes to playing with
when I
others,
think about
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh. And when it comes to playing with others, most of that is now playing games with my kids, reviving all the Mario games and playing Mario Kart and Super Smash Brothers and that kind of stuff. Or, playing a quick game with my husband. And that's about it.
Yeah, my littles are still quite little. The youngest just turned 1. And so one game, if you can even call it that I play with them most days is at bedtime. If we've gotten to bed early enough, we do kind of improvised Mad Libs where I'll just start telling whatever crazy fairy tale pops into my brain. And they get to fill in all the blanks. And we come up with some crazy, crazy stuff, and they're just giggling like mad by the time we're done. It's fun.
When I think back about your earlier question about how did I get into gaming, it makes me think of my grandfather. When I was pretty small, my grandfather taught me cribbage, which is a card game. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And we would play cribbage for hours. And he also taught me chess and checkers. And so I have great memories of being with my grandfather playing games. That was something we did a lot of work together too. But my grandfather would play games with me more than my dad did. My dad likes card games and cribbage, and we still do that now, but he was never into chess or any of the strategy games that I liked. I think they were already too complex or too complicated for him to bother wanting to learn at that point. And so I think a lot of times gaming and the people we did it with or the way we got into it affects our psychology in that it brings good memories. And sometimes we stimulate those memories when we play again. I play cribbage with my kids, or at least my son. My daughters don't like to play, but my son-in-laws do. and then my grandkids, they like to play games. What I played with my kids were the video games, Mario Kart and Medal of Honor. And, I like games where I can kill things. They like races and things like that. But it's a good way to interact with both friends and family.
It is. Yeah, I remember hours playing hearts and cribbage with my grandparents whenever we'd get to their house when I was a kid. And I think it's a pretty universal way for people to build relationships.
I also think it plays a lot into time and the availability thereof, how we choose to spend it. My kids know that, especially in pandemic times when everything happens in the house, I'm I'm very, very busy trying to get work done, trying to take care of aging parents, trying to take care of them and get their schooling done for the older two. Obviously, baby's not in school yet, but they kind of know that when mommy carves out time to play, this is special time for them, and it makes them feel special to know that their fun matters enough to carve out that time. What would you say to that sort of idea, Scarlett? Is that a way we can kind of show love for the people in our lives?
Yes, especially with children. One of the things that we do when we, so there's a specific kind of therapy that we'll do with parents that's really focused more on discipline and, how do you get your kid to listen to you? But a key part of it is what we call special time. And that's where we start, is we teach parents how to sit down and play with their kids in a way that really matters to a kid that's, between the ages of 3 and 8. And what matters to kids that age is, are my parents listening to me? Are they doing things that interest me? And are they showing that they appreciate what interests me as well. Whether that's sitting down and if they want to play with Legos, helping them build something, or playing a specific game that they want to play, or doing the Mad Libs that you do at bedtime. That's a really key part of building a relationship with a child, and it really helps with everything else that goes on around that, because if they trust a parent and if they know that this parent cares about them, they're more likely to take out the trash when you ask them to, and small things like that.
Yeah, that is some fantastic advice. Thank you.
I was looking at the conversation going on in the chat. Yeah. Somebody was asking about how to avoid fighting over games. With Monopoly, I don't think that's possible. But I think there are built-in, maybe not built-in, but some games in the rules will have ways to get around fighting, which I think usually boil down to, just roll the dice and see who gets the better one, and then they win the argument.
I think that's a great way to solve it.
Although sometimes it's more. I have been in games where we've had disagreements, and I did not want to settle it with the die roll because I was right. And I knew what the rules said, and I wanted to play it according to the rules.
See, but that's a fantastic lesson in life, though. Because sometimes even when you are right, you don't win the argument, because really making peace with the other person is more important than winning.
Is it really?
Do you want to finish the game?
No, but that is a great life lesson.
Yeah.
In my profession, I get to see a lot of people who will not compromise and who have refused to compromise, insisted that they were right. And they may or may not have been, but their lives are much unhappier because of their refusal to get along in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with kids, I mean, sometimes they're just not in an age where they can compromise. Teenagers are probably in the best position to start learning how to compromise with each other. Younger kids, I have a general rule in my house that if you're going to argue over the video game, it gets turned off. And you do that a few times and everybody whines and complains, and then it kind of stops and they start figuring out how to compromise so that mom doesn't turn the video game off.
Based on the comments there, I'm reminded of a police officer I know, and we were having a conversation one day. He was an Air Force brat, at least some kind of military brat. And we got talking about Edgar Rice Burroughs' books, the Barsoom books, because that was something we had in common. But another thing we had in common was simply playing Dungeons and Dragons. And to look at him, I would never guess that this guy ever played Dungeons and Dragons. He's a great big strong police officer, very serious guy. But he told me about how playing the games helped him interact with people and helped him learn a lot about how to deal with people. I think that's one of the fundamental things we learn with gaming is dealing with other people, how to get along, how to get our way, how to manipulate them.
That's not inaccurate.
Yep. Yeah. I saw a lot of that running role play games, and especially running the LARP. So much of it is just people figuring out how to interact. Let's see. Are we spotting any more excellent questions in the chat there?
I just see people talking about die rolls.
There's a question from Unconquered One saying, what do you think the best ways are to bring play therapy elements into game design? Keep it fun and increase the outcome.
Play therapy is really focused more towards, trying to get kids to explore what's going on in their lives in a therapeutic context. And so I don't know that I would lean towards trying to incorporate that so much into gameplay. But I think some of the things that they use are, elements that really help children explore creativity. A lot of play therapy is focused around using things that are like dolls and things that are really open-ended that you can kind of create your own story with. And those are really good for young children.
And I have no comment on that because I don't even really know what play therapy is.
Go ahead with the next question, please.
Okay. See, Jay Gosling, all Redditing, asks, in the writing panels, they talk a lot about how structure breeds creativity. How does the structure of games affect the creativity in making them, and also the social interactions while playing them?
Okay, gamer perspective here. I find that the more the structure allows you to forget about the structure and just be part of the game and be part of the story, be interacting with the other characters, be absorbed in whatever's happening in the game, the more effective it is at encouraging interaction. So an ideal structure from that perspective gives you just enough structure to keep things moving along, and after that kind of disappears into the background.
I think the structure of the game and how it really affects how it's played and how much creativity it invites from the players. For instance, I've played games and read about games that there are no dice, but everybody throws in something about what happens next. And I can't remember the names of most of these games, but everybody adds to the story. It's sort of a narrative that builds. And at some point, everybody gets to put in some input into that narrative, and then they vote, or they could roll a dice about which one of these options we think is best or is most interesting for the way our game will proceed. So I think a looser structure actually breeds more creativity, and that may be the point you were just making. But the structure, I think, also directs that creativity to whether is the creativity simply which weapon I'm going to use to kill this guy, or which magic potion or spell I'm going to cast, or is there enough flexibility in the structure to let me decide that I'm not just going to pull a sword, I'm going to climb up the rope or leap off the table and swing on the chandelier. And so the looser structure, I think, lets you be more creative, but it's tougher to deal with. You can't just look at the table. You've got to work things out and decide what the odds are.
Okay, I've got to jump in for a moment on that. One thing I thoroughly enjoyed as a world runner, and my players somewhat unfortunately figured out that I loved it, was I loved it when they would come up with creative ways to get around a fight. Like, are we going to try to make an alliance? Are we going to try to tame the savage beast? And so sometimes they just, by golly, wanted to get in there and kill whatever it was. But a lot of times, even when plot-wise they were supposed to get in there and kill off whatever it was, they'd be like, let's talk this through. Ranger, can you speak to the beast? courtier, can you try to diplomat our way through this? And they'd come up with all these clever things that, dice-wise, what are you gonna do? But we'd role play our way through it, and they had a ball, and they wound up thoroughly topsy-turvying the world a few times.
Well, that's the fun of being the game master, the dungeon master, the world master, is they come up with wild things, and you have to figure out how to make them work and how to make it happen.
And Scarlett, any thoughts on this end of things?
I mean, you guys covered it pretty well. Having a structure that kind of fades into the background is probably the best for enhancing creativity. If you have to think a whole lot about, what are the rules and can I do this or can I not, it gets pretty complicated. Think of it as like, you only have so much brain power. And if you're having to devote it to, well, does it fit inside these rules? Well, that's taking away from the amount that's devoted to creativity. It's the same thing when playing video games. Probably the most frustrating ones are the ones with really complex controls that take a while to learn. And you're like, oh gosh, I remember playing like Mortal Kombat and trying to figure out, what buttons do I press in what order to do what moves. And those are really hard.
Managed to get into those for exactly that reason.
Yeah. But if everything just kind of flows really naturally, then I think it really opens people up to being creative.
Yeah, we're going to be a lot less creative with Monopoly than a game of D&D.
Yep.
I see that Jay Gosling was asking about what our favorite games were. Board games, RPG, console, PC. What would you recommend we try if we haven't yet?
I mean, I mostly play on the Switch because that's what I have. And so right now, a lot of my favorite games really revolve around what my kids' favorite games are. So it's Pokemon and Mario Kart. We recently got a new board game that's like this maze where you have to like move your players through it, but you move the pieces of the maze. I think it's called Labyrinth. And that's been really fun with them because they're trying to figure out, you take one piece out and you put it in somewhere else and it slides all the pieces in that line. And so they're trying to figure out, how do I move this one piece so that I can get my character from here to here? And then they get really frustrated when one of their siblings messes up their plan. But it's been very fun.
Yeah, there's an old card game, I believe called Once Upon a Time, where you're dealt a hand of cards and can draw more at certain times during the game. And the goal is to get to your happy ending card. And you can interrupt other players whenever a card you have pops up in what they said. So that's a lot of fun. I'd recommend it highly, both for creativity and for storytelling and for a whole bunch of laughs. Let's see, for RPGs, call me old school, but I'm partial to GURPS, just because you only need one kind of dice to play it, so it's very beginner friendly, and yet you can make it as complicated as you want. There are so many ways you can fine-tune your character, give them advantages, disadvantages, balance things out. And yet it's all within this simple structure so that once things are built, you can just kind of throw structure to the background and play your character, tell the story. And let's see. This is perhaps too geeky for some people, but if you're brave enough to give it a go, I really do recommend trying live action role playing games. There are several not operating so much now, yay pandemic, but there are several groups up in Salt Lake and one or two with branches here in Utah County. And it's really a lot of fun to take what you do in tabletops and bring it to immediate glorious life. There's just no comparison for the immediacy of it. So if you have a chance, give it a try. If anyone wants recommendations on games, please message me later. Okay, Stanley, thoughts?
Well, I've always enjoyed a variety of games. With the family, when we get together, we'll play Uno and Apples to Apples and some other board games and Pictionary-like games. But I've always liked the role-playing games. I've kind of moved into more role-playing games. I have my own system that I've made up that I play, and then I've got a skirmish game that I've made up based on lots of other games that I've played, so that I know they can be quick. I don't have to do a lot of prep. I've always enjoyed strategy games. I think my very favorite ones were from the Napoleonic era. There is War and Peace, and then my absolute favorite is Empires in Arms. But to play that one, you've got to have a lot of time, and you need, I think, at least 6 people who can dedicate, several weekends or Saturdays and evenings over at least a month to play the full game.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, and as you would expect, it has been years and years since I was able to play that.
Okay. Do we have further questions from the audience?
We do. Unconquered One asks, what elements of psychology, and also asked what elements of game design, so game design or psychology, can be used to increase cooperation, or teamwork, and positive interaction?
So, with psychology, I think the most effective way to increase any behavior is to reward it, is usually what we see. So if you want a kid to do their chores, you reward them, be it by telling them hey, thanks, you did a good job, or by some other way. And so games that are built to reward cooperation are usually the most effective. I mean, the simplest example is my kids have this really simple game that's designed for like 3 and 4-year-olds, but the whole goal of the game is for all the players to work together to build this tower of blocks. And so, since cooperating is reinforced, because when you cooperate, everybody wins, then...
And if everybody wins, nobody wins.
Yes. It's a little bit harder with adults who are a little bit more competitive. But since the whole goal is to cooperate, it encourages the kids to cooperate and work together. Games that are built where there's just one winner and somebody has to come out on top, those just naturally kind of encourage and reward divisiveness, because that's how you win. And to win is the reinforcement. It's the goal.
Well, some of us want to see our enemies driven before us, and we want to hear the lamentations of their women.
Yes, and so I think that's where team games really come out on top. I mean, especially with adults and with teenagers, there's this natural rivalry and competitiveness, and so team sports, most basic example, that's really where you build cooperativeness and people coming together and working together, because you beat somebody.
Team sports give you someone else to blame when you lose.
That too.
Yeah, I think that earlier question goes back to, how do you define positive? You said, was it for positive interaction? And I guess the question is, how do you define positive? Because there are different ways to bring people together. either for a common goal, for the common good, or to gang up on somebody else who may be so strong that it takes everyone else to defeat them or to accomplish the goal.
I mean, you could make a game where the whole goal is to defeat the dungeon master or the world master.
Isn't that how a lot of the players look at it? How can I mess with the DM?
Yep.
Yeah, when they're doing what we call metagaming, yes, that pops up a lot.
I was just looking at the comments there, and I was wondering if anybody does the puzzle or the escape room games.
I haven't done any.
Haven't yet. Eager to try, but when do I get away with three littles?
Yeah, I've wanted to do that too. My wife actually bought a box escape room games that you don't actually escape from your own room, but it's a board game that you escape from, and that can be pretty fun. But we had two of my son-in-laws played, and they're engineers, mathematician guys. You know, they're way up here as far as complexity of thought, and they were trying to make things way too complex. The answers were much more simple than the various numeric combinations and divisions and additions and square roots that they were coming up with. It was very entertaining.
Yeah, sometime when pandemic's over, we need to organize some sort of LTUE excursion to one of those escape rooms. I think it'd be a blast.
Yeah, they seem to be pretty fun.
Yeah. Okay, do we have further questions from our audience?
Yes, we do. Jay Gosling, all redditing, asks, why is competition fun? Why is beating someone else entertaining for us as humans?
There is a great primal reward that we get from beating other people. And if you think about it 1,000 years ago, and even somewhat today, it's advantageous. When humans were kind of living in less cohesive groups, smaller groups, beating the rival tribe meant that you got more food. We've kind of been programmed by way of evolution to be competitive and for competition to be rewarding. And now we live in a much different time, and those developments, they're still a part of who we are. And so now the challenge is to figure out how to find that satisfaction in ways that don't make everything fall apart in what we've built together. Games are a great way to do that. And football.
Well, somebody has to win in football, right?
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it is never my team.
Yeah. I really like that question from Jay Gosling about, why is competition fun? Why is it fun to triumph over or to dominate, to crush an opponent? And of course, I've elaborated a little bit on what I think he was really thinking. I think we get an adrenaline rush. I can remember games when I've played that I've got an adrenaline rush or dopamine or one of those brain candy chemicals. I don't know what they all are. And I think a lot of it we could ascribe to what in religion we call the natural man, which is something we generally try to avoid. But in a game situation, it's safe. We get to feed our desire for competition and to triumph, all the while knowing that if we lose, we're not going to die. All of our resources aren't going to be taken away. And yet, when we win, either because we had the lucky dice or because we were able to work things out better than our opponent did, or things just fell in our favor. We get that high, we get that rush that makes us feel good that we've accomplished something, even though we really might not have accomplished that much, but it felt pretty good.
Yeah, I'd like to speak just briefly to kind of the flip side of that. As the DM or world runner, you often wind up being the one designing and role-playing the things, the characters that are meant to be crushed, frankly. And there's a very different kind of satisfaction that comes from being able to build them in such a way that, yes, it is by golly satisfying for the characters to go in and crush. So there's that satisfaction of building for others to go in and crush and crash and get their aggressions out. That's also a very enjoyable.
And it's more.
Yeah.
It's more satisfying if it's difficult, if they can't just walk in and lay waste, but it's a difficult task for them, but they are able to accomplish it.
Yeah. Building something where they had to work together, and by the time they got to the boss fight or whatever at the end, they were just so furious at this evil whatever. Building that is just so much fun. Building that satisfying experience for the players.
Yeah, that's really what it's all about. Whether you're doing it for your kids or for your friends or anybody who may want to join your online group or your LARP group, it's all about building something that can be challenging without, a total party kill.
Okay, what else do we have going on for questions?
Unconquered One asks, what would be the best way to promote competition and cooperation in a rule structure?
Okay, that's kind of a tricky one. I'll take a quick stab at it. I helped develop the rule systems for a couple of the local LARPs. It's it requires a lot of play testing from my experience, because you're not going to get it right the first time. You'll come up with a brilliant idea and you'll think, oh, this will motivate the characters this way, and you go play test it and they do the complete opposite thing. And so part of that is just players, and humans don't do what you expect a lot of the time. And so part of good game design is also building in the flexibility, so that when players do go in a completely different direction or react the opposite of how you're expecting, you can kind of salvage things and still create an enjoyable gaming experience. For rules, so much of it is in for role-playing games anyway. I find so much of it is in the structure of how characters are created. Because if they have to create characters that can't just charge in and do every single thing all by themselves, cooperation is necessary. They need the other parts of their group to be able to unlock the lock and kill the monster on the other side of the lock, for classic dungeon crawl example. They need different types of characters in order to be able to pass different challenges. And then it's kind of up to those running the games to create challenges that play to the types of characters that are there. And those are my thoughts. Tossing it out to our other panelists.
If I can jump in.
Yeah, please.
My daughter, one of the games she got for Christmas, I cannot remember the name of it, but it requires you to work together because there's some psychic who has visions and they give you cards, and then the players have to look at those cards and decide what elements of those cards helps point to finding the killer. And so I like that, where you give a group a task to solve something. It's kind of like the puzzle rooms, the escape rooms, only it's simply solving the mystery. And so I think that's a good rules technique for getting people to work together, is giving them some resources that they have to match or connect together and discuss to advance to the next step and to eventually solve the problem. Wish I could remember the name of that game, I would tell you, but I can't.
And I think all of those touch on a key part, that is that if you make the whole structure such that you can't really, the players can't defeat the boss or get through the stages without each other, be it that they each have a key piece that's needed to progress, or some kind of information that everybody needs. If you build it in that way, then everybody's more likely to work together.
And our time is starting to run low. So panelists, any final thoughts on our discussion topic? Anything you want to pass on to the audience?
Ladies first.
Okay.
Just that games are a very healthy medium for everyone. It's great for families to play together, for friends to play together. And so even if you're not really feeling like it, even if there's a lot of barriers in the way right now, I encourage everyone to get out and try to find some ways to play some games.
Great. I would just like to thank the other panelists. I enjoyed hearing what you had to say. I like the questions from those who were in the chat. I'm just glad anybody would listen to us. And keep playing games because it's fun.
Exactly. Well, thank you all very much for coming to our panel. Thank you, panelists.